morning. You know, 20 years, it's amazing. You think about it. I just want to ask a question. How many people, stand up if you were here 20 years ago in this room? Stand up. Sid, Ken, I can't see with the sun in my eyes. There are about, I don't know, 10 people that were here in the very beginning. And when you think about it, this conference started as an opportunity to gather the best and brightest across all areas in supply chain. And back then it was a novelty because you had warehousing, you had trucking, you had freight forwarding, you had brokerage, you had IWA, you had Wall Street conferences, but there was nobody that was gathering all the top CEOs to talk about the big issues. And now, 20 years later, when you look at the talent that's in the room, the brain power, the substance, there's over $120 billion of market value in this room, and a number that's going to keep going up. And I just want to say it's a pleasure to welcome all of you. So thanks to everybody here for making this such a great event. So thank you. So just to give you a sense of who's here, and I'll point out the obvious. You can't fit 400 logos on a page, so this just give you a snapshot of some of the many companies whose leaders are sitting in this room, and really across all areas of supply chain, and the software side, and the services side, and the asset side, and many others. So if you haven't had the opportunity to spend some time meeting new folks so far at the reception last night or otherwise, I'd just encourage you to take the opportunity to do that. Part of what's special about this, besides the fact that if you were facing the other way, you'd get to see the ocean, and here we are in Palm Beach in January, and that doesn't suck, right? Better than Cleveland, Nick? Yeah, maybe? A little bit. But this is a place where things happen. The Shark Tank is a place where startups get the opportunity to tell their story, and many of those startups have gone on to do great things and have won lots of business from people in the room, raised capital, and even sold. And stories of companies like Secure Space, Venti, Green Screens, Autoscheduler, and others. It's a place where M&A happens, and there have been all kinds of interesting deals that have come together here, whether the Uber Transplace or Secure Space and Vase WiseTech, Green Screens Triumph, and many others. Actually, one of the CEOs who was going to be here today had to delay because a transaction that he was working on with somebody that he did speak with at this conference, Doug Wagner, CEO of Echo, just bought IDS, which was announced yesterday. So things continue to happen. New investments and companies like Stat, Reverse Logics, XPO, and others that either raised capital or had transactions occur as a result of this. And then finally, and most importantly for everybody in this room, new ideas and opportunities. It's a place to learn. It's a source of community. It's an opportunity to share ideas with each other. And so much talent and brain power in the room. Great opportunity to listen and learn. And I know that's something that I really look forward to. So why are we here? Fundamentally, this is a place and an opportunity to listen and learn, an opportunity to benefit from the gathering of so many fantastic people here. It's a place to decide. There are lots of major inflection points, and I'm going to share some analysis about what some of those inflection points are that we're all facing in the supply chain world. It's a place to act, to think about where and how do I take action in order to take advantage of what's happening in the markets. And then ultimately, it's how to win. So if you think about it, we are in what I believe is the fourth wave of supply chain innovation. So you go back to 1956 when Malcolm McLean invented the box and initiated a wave of containerization. The very first shipment, and here we are 70 years later, The idea that Malcolm McLean had was if you went to the port of New York and you tried to ship something and items were packed loosely, and that meant there was lots of crime, easy to steal, it was inefficient, couldn't put a lot of volume in it, and fundamentally it was not a high-scale model. And he said, what if I took an old oil tanker and put containers in, and those containers could easily be taken out and put on a truck, and I could do this with less theft, with more efficiency, with more volume, lower cost, and it worked. And Malcolm McLean ushered in an era of containerization, and that was great for trucking, for shipping, for retail, low-cost manufacturing. It was great for all of us as consumers. We all benefited from that. Second chapter, fast forward to 1980. And the era of deregulation, because around that time we saw deregulation of trucking, rail, aviation, and all that deregulation, it's ironic as we sit here in Palm Beach, miles away from the winter White House at Mar-a-Lago, but who was the president that ushered in deregulation? Of all people, it was Jimmy Carter. And when deregulation took effect, it meant that trucking companies could set their own price. It meant that truck brokerage as an industry became much more relevant, because when you had variability in price, then having someone that could manage that and intermediate that mattered. Trucking companies that were smart could figure out how to focus on high volume, high profit lanes, and all kinds of other ripple effects, including the value of data and analytics. Third wave, e-commerce. So 1997, Amazon goes public, and of course a few years later launches Amazon Prime. I don't have to tell anybody in this room what that's meant for the supply chain world, right? More volume, shipping to home, ultimately next day, same day, and the whole nature of what gets moved, how, when, where, and to whom changed because of e-commerce. Well, now we're entering the fourth wave, and what is that fourth wave? You could argue there are lots of possible answers. The democratization of data, the fact that small companies have access to a lot of the same amazing technology that big companies have. You could argue that it's about automation and robotics and man plus machine in warehouses. You could argue a lot of things, but in the end, I think it's AI. And when Mark Andreessen famously said software eats the world, because he was implying that software was automating everything that we do. Well, now people say that AI eats software, and it's incredible, and some of us dabble in it. If you think about what happened back in November of 22 when ChatGPT came out, and many of us wanted to go see, well, what does this actually mean? But many of us are now actually using it in business in ways that are powerful and deeply disruptive, and we'll talk more about that over the course of today. So this plays out in the financial markets. If you think about it, and at BGSA we map the 9 publicly traded segments of supply chain, and 3 of them did very well last year, 3 of them were flat, and 3 of them were down. Healthcare, logistics, railroads all were up particularly, but by and large there's a growing divergence between categories and companies, and part of it's based on the inflection points that we're going to get into. So, if you think about who are the big winners in terms of market value over the last year. So, the x-axis tells you the different categories of companies. The y-axis tells you the percentage increase in stock market growth, and then the size of the bubble gives you the picture of the size of market value of the company. So what stands out here? Well, first of all, if you look at the far left in the healthcare category, companies like Cardinal did particularly well, mainly because they were shifting into higher margin services, home healthcare, and also some M&A. Interestingly, if you look in the logistics realm, C.H. Robinson was the top performer, up 56%. And a lot of that has to do with AI, and we'll share more about that in a minute. And then third, rail, and of course the big rail merger, $85 billion merger, which is going to create the first truly transcontinental railroad. A regulatory setback last week, but pretty sure it'll eventually get done. So fundamentally, there's a lot to unpack in the data, but those are three highlights. But I want to go closer into one of them in particular, which is C.H. Robinson. So if you look at what Robinson did, there was a lot of hype about Robinson's AI initiative. But in the end, there were a few things that really mattered. Robinson staffed up about 400 engineers, created about 30 different agents, and focused in a series of targeted areas. And one of those areas was automating the quoting process, because Robinson is a huge company, lots of inbound emails, particularly from small customers asking for quotes. And unfortunately, a lot of those get missed. We all have this problem, right? How many emails do we all get? And think about that across your entire company. Things get missed. So Robinson, using AI agents, said, let's figure out how to quote everything that comes in. And they went from hitting 60% to 100% of what comes in. And then Robinson said, and let's figure out how to slash the response time, because if I'm a customer and I ask somebody for a quote, particularly if it's a spot market interaction, what am I going to do if I don't get an instant response, right? I'm moving on. So the average response time was 20 minutes across Robinson as an organization. They cut that to 30 seconds. And that's just one of the 30 different agents in applications. And so that made a big difference. And when you look at what that meant for their performance in a year where the supply chain index as a whole was up 7%, but Robinson was up 56%. So it's a big deal, and this to me is one of those watershed moments where things tip over from hype to proven data-driven reality. So with that as kind of a spotlight on what's driving value and change in the supply chain industry, what do we expect in the coming year? So this is really an opportunity to really have a conversation about the big themes driving change in supply chain, and what does it mean for all of us in the room in terms of opportunity. So let me start with, well, the big four in my mind are tariffs and trade, and those of us that reading the papers every day have whiplash. Are the tariffs on or are they off? Are we, applying massive tariffs to Europe with Greenland or not? Is Liberation Day going to staying as is, or is that changing? But the reality is we live in an ecosystem where tariffs and the impact on trade is higher today than it's been in any of our lifetimes. And so what does that mean for us? Second is the Great Freight Recession. So here we are in year 4 of what was supposed to be a year 1 recession, right? 1-year recession. And those of us that have been here, and historically there's been a trucking panel where we've had 4 of the top 10 trucking CEOs in the country. And every year, the consensus from, again, top, smart, operational leaders has been, we think the recession is going to be over in 6 months, right? Well, here we are 4 years later. Is it finally over? I think it is, but we'll see. I hope I'm not going to be standing here next year saying, well, I was wrong last time, but it's possible. So where are we, and what does that mean, and what are all the ripple effects? The third is AI. And the fourth is capital markets, and how does all this play out from a financial standpoint? So let's start with number 1, tariffs and trade. So I'm sure a lot of people saw this tweet when President Trump sent this out in the beginning of April, and this was the Liberation Day tariffs. What were all the tariffs going to be on each individual country? And what did this mean? It meant that there was a lot of pre-buying that came in, right? A lot of shipments that came into Port of LA, Long Beach. The folks here that are in the room, right? I mean, like Sid with the Cal Cartage business for NFI. I'm sure you benefited from the pre-buying in March before this. Other folks that had port-based businesses, you saw that. The volume was pulled up, and then it dropped back down. People are wondering, well, what kinds of shifts do I need to make in my supply chain? Do I need to be less dependent on countries that are going to be subject to these high tariffs? Do I bring more into the U.S.? So all kinds of discussion. But what's really happening? Well, one thing that's happening is we finally saw Mexico overtake China as U.S. trading partner. notwithstanding the fact that there's still a tariff discussion underway with Mexico. Fundamentally, we're seeing that the U.S.-Mexico trade ties are getting stronger and tighter as a direct offset to what's happening with China. Secondly, and this I think is worth taking a closer look, we are going to see, and I believe we're in the early innings of the surge of localization. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if you were going to rely on long supply chains, but you had the risk of tariffs or disruptions or other issues, people are increasingly compressing that. So Prologis did a study, a survey of over 1,800 executives, US, Europe, Asia, worldwide, and what they found was the vast majority of those executives said, I'm looking to reduce the length of my supply chain. I'm looking for more local partners. So if I'm a US company, I'm looking for more US manufacturing, warehousing, and supply chain partners. Same thing if I'm in any other major market worldwide. But clearly that's the case here. So number one, there's this increase in desire for localized manufacturing and supply chain partners. And that's going to take a long time to play out, but that has huge ripple effects. And for those of us that are focused on the domestic supply chain here, should be good news. Second is, what are the drivers? How do I decide where to locate? And proximity to energy becomes increasingly important. By the way, out of curiosity, anybody here involved in data centers for supply chain, whether it's got to do with your warehouse business or other energy linkages? I see Ken, John, I see a couple of hands. So I think this is something you're going to see a lot more of. My prediction is around this time next year, the year after, we're going to see a lot more because growth in localization and proximity to data centers, to energy, to power data centers, is going to have all kinds of ripple effects. So topic 2, the Great Freight Recession. Is it finally over? So Chris Pickett, who's in the room here. Chris, where are you? Oh, okay, great, thank you. Chris publishes this research, does a great job pulling together spot market, contract market data about what's happening in the freight cycle. And Chris assures me that the freight recession is over, right, Chris? Yeah. If you look at the cycles and where we are now, Chris's research suggests about a 20% increase in rates this year. Now, obviously, there are multiple variables, but fundamentally, why is that? Well, for starters, a lot of capacity has left the market, and that continues to be the case. Sonar, I know Craig Fuller is here somewhere. Craig, anybody? All right, well, Craig's research shows that the trucking capacity that really was a glut on the market during the afterhang from COVID, because so many people entered when they saw that there was all this demand. A lot of that capacity has come out. And so, pricing is supply and demand, right? So if there's less supply, there's a tightening of pricing. Meanwhile, one leading indicator is rejection data. Rejections, where carriers are saying no, are starting to spike. And what that should mean is that it's a tighter market. Tighter market, prices go up. So these are early indicators. Obviously, one big thing that we don't know is what happens from a macroeconomic standpoint, consumer demand. But fundamentally, if demand stays where it is or goes up a little and supply tightens, we're going to see a much stronger freight market. And that's good news for most folks in the room here, whether you're in the freight world or you're a provider to freight companies, software services or otherwise. There are all kinds of ripple effects from that. Okay, next is technology. So AI. In November of 22, when ChatGPT came out, if you had decided to invest in the basket of publicly traded companies that were either pure plays in AI or capital equipment or otherwise tied to AI, you did great. Okay, you made almost a 200% return if you invested in direct AI companies from then to now. If you invested in everything else, it was a fraction of that. Okay, it was 1/7 of the return. Okay, so basically I think like 26%. And so this is the beginning of this divergence that we talked about earlier. And I'm going to share some things that may be intuitively obvious, and then a couple of supply chain specific points that you may find more surprising. So look, number one, the adoption is faster today than for just about anything we've ever seen. I mean, look at Microsoft Azure going from 2 billion to nearly 18 billion just in 2 years. Amazing growth, right? Staggering. Similarly, the meteoric rise in adoption. How much time does it take to go from start to 1 billion users? And ChatGPT did it in basically 1,000 days, which is massively faster than Gmail or virtually anything else. What's interesting to me is, where does the money go? So if you think about it, the tech CapEx last year as a percent of GDP, most of which was driven by AI, was equal to just about everything that we've spent CapEx on as a country on a scaled basis as a percent of GDP, okay? So I'm not just talking about raw dollars, I'm talking about percent of GDP. So if you think about it, what we spent on Triborough Bridge, Hoover Dam, Manhattan Project, Apollo Project, Interstate Highway, broadband, all of that combined is about the same percent of GDP as what we as a country spent this past year. All right, so like, that's a big deal. That's a lot of money. And sometimes you really have to take a step back to think about just how big that is. And it's not just because people are spending money and it's a bubble. Sure, there's a bubble, but there's also real money being made. If you look at the profitability of companies in the tech sector versus everything else, it reflects that. And if you look at the productivity gains from task complexity that LLMs and other forms of AI can solve, it's incredible. But what's interesting to me, and I suspect everybody in this room, is what does it mean for supply chain? Now, interestingly, Stanford did a survey of close to 3,000 people, 3,000 executives, and the question was, where are you seeing, or do you expect to see, the greatest impact in your business, right? I mean, you're the CEO of a company, you've got all these different silos, and finance and accounting and HR and manufacturing and supply chain. And it turns out that supply chain is the category in which people are expecting the biggest cost savings across all the silos of an organization. That's a big deal, right? That tells you that CEOs are thinking about adopting AI in their businesses, number one, to attack costs, whether that's network optimization or inventory planning or a whole host of other things that you can just do much faster and cheaper using AI. Interestingly, if you look at the right side of the chart from a revenue standpoint, it turns out that there's a lot of expectation of revenue growth from AI supply chain applications too. So there's a lot happening in this realm that is an opportunity or a threat for everybody here. And when it comes to where supply chain executives are spending money, the Prologis survey of over 1,800 supply chain executives reflects that the biggest category of investment for most companies in this industry is AI, not surprisingly. So what does that mean for the supply chain ecosystem? Well, when you look at all the categories of supply chain software that are tied to AI, logistics process automation is probably the category that's the most immediately relevant, because fundamentally it's about taking steps out of a complex supply chain. Well, guess what? If you look at the companies that have attracted the most capital, and some of them are here in this room, and some of them have been winners at the supply chain Shark Tank here, that category, right, logistics process automation, has attracted the most capital. By the way, when we do the Shark Tank here, we had over 60 applicants, and more than 50 of them would have fit in this bucket. We could have had a whole panel of just that, but we thought it'd be more fun to mix it up. So don't worry, it'll be a little more varied. But this is coming. And so finally, this brings us to the capital markets. So where's the money going? Well, if you look at global venture capital investment last year, all right, which was just under $500 billion, massive amount of money, 5% of that went into supply chain, and over 50% of that, $12 billion, went into AI-related investment. So there's a lot of money coming into this. And then if you look just at the U.S. piece, where there was about $11 billion of spend last year on U.S. Venture capital and supply chain, last year versus this year, the total numbers didn't go up very much. We basically went from 11 to 12. But pretty much every other category declined, raised less capital this year than the prior year, with the one exception, of course, being AI. So this is pretty interesting because it means that, let me come back to this. It means that from a capital standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, from an opportunity standpoint, you're going to see a lot more of this. So meanwhile, on the other side of the capital markets, what's happening in the M&A world? Well, a few big themes, and I'm going to shift from AI to everything else. So first of all, there's the traditional consolidation, and there are many of the folks that are on this page here are in the room. DSV's $16 billion acquisition of Schenker, the UP-NS $85 billion merger underway, Lineage, which has continued to make lots of acquisitions in the cold chain warehousing industry. This is bread and butter consolidation. I'm great at something, I'm going to do more of it, I'm taking out a competitor. Then you have the technology expansion. So I'm great at one thing and I'm looking to do something adjacent to that. Triumph and their strength in factoring and other financial services for logistics, expanding, where's Don? Where's Don with green screens? Expanding into the intelligence side and predictive pricing. Aptian Logility, DAT Outco. Like, these are all examples of companies that are great at something and they're buying in an area that's adjacent to expand the scope of what they do. Third category, riches and niches. So companies that are specializing in something relatively narrow and focused where they could seek to try to become the leader in a category. So Blue Yonder, broad-based supply chain software, made a move in return software with the acquisition of Uptoro. Asset trades. So two big companies. There's a division, and it has one home and one entity, but really the natural home is somewhere else. And so there's an asset trade. The Martin Transport Hub Group deal. Martin had an intermodal, a temp-controlled intermodal business. Didn't really want to be an intermodal. The biggest pure play in intermodal, of course, is Hub Group, and they said, we'd like that, and that looked like the more natural home. UPS and their warehouse to go business, which is really D2C e-com fulfillment on a distributed basis, and doesn't really fit, or UPS concluded didn't really fit their core focus, so divested it to someone for whom it was a core fit, which was Stored. So those kinds of asset trades, I think we're going to see more of. And then the fifth, e-commerce enablement. As e-commerce grows, what's the supply chain network required to support it? DHL buying IDS, the Inmar intelligence business as well. These are examples of companies seeking to add more capabilities in the e-commerce enablement realm. So I think these are 5 themes we're going to see more of. So let me bring it home to what does it mean for everybody in this room. So there are some really important CEO decisions to make right now. I think, first of all, fork in the road. There is a fork in the road because sometimes there are decisions that really matter. I think it was Lenin that said there are I'm going to mangle this, so whoever's videoing it, don't record this part. There are decades where moments happen, and then there are moments where decades happen. And the Bolshevik Revolution, of course, one of those moments where decades happened. I think we're at one of those moments where decades of impact comes out of what we do now. And I think the impact of technology and impact of AI, combined with consolidation, combined with some of these global issues, it really does make this a pivotal time for all of us. And so I think a second key question to ask is, where do I focus? As an example, I mean, this is an eye chart, so for those of you in the back, or for that matter, the front, the colors on this represent the growth rate last year, state by state. So guess what? Some states had a lot of growth, right? I mean, Texas had a lot of growth. Some, like for example, some of the companies in the Southeast, or geographies rather in the Southeast, had little to none. So where am I investing? And if I'm in a world of localization where some markets, local markets are going to matter more than remote markets, what are the local markets I'm going to pick? Similarly, what services, what technologies, what customers, what moves do I prioritize? And the last is, am I committed? You know, am I a tourist or am I a native when it comes to some of these things? I think these are questions that all of us need to be thinking about right now. Whether our businesses are in turnaround mode or we're facing an inflection directly, or if we're maybe a couple of steps removed. So how does that relate to everybody in this room? Well, this is what everybody here is thinking about and talking about. So the survey that we do, by the way, out of the 400 plus people that are here, something like 350 people filled out this survey, so thank you. That's one of the things that makes this event great, is we actually have the opportunity to know and to share what everybody's thinking about and what everybody cares about. One question we ask is, how'd you do last year? What was your growth? And I know this is self-reported data, so let's assume that it's true, but have to say that. I was a reform strategy consultant. More than half the people in this room had double-digit growth this past year. Well, that's fantastic, particularly in a world where, you know, I think GDP growth was, what, 1 and change? So that's great. Similarly, what about expectations for the coming year? Same story. The majority of the people in this room are expecting more than 10% growth for your own businesses this year. Okay, great. But it's not going to work for I mean, there's sort of like the Lake Wobegon effect that Garrison Kaler talked about, where everybody is above average intelligence, right? I mean, can't be, right? Not everybody can be there. So if you're going to get double-digit growth, what am I going to do this year? How am I going to make that happen? Well, one way that people are looking to make that happen is through M&A. And if you look at the survey data, what level of M&A do you expect for the industry as a whole? And the overwhelming majority said either more or much more. And then when asked the same question about what does it mean for you and how likely are you to do something, M&A, capital, invest, divest, otherwise. And again, the overwhelming majority were either very likely or somewhat likely. So there's a lot of interest in this industry, but most importantly in this room, in figuring out how to get this right and taking action to do it. So lastly, what does that mean for us and for how to get there? By the way, somebody said to me last year, said, you know, you guys, you're great at conferences. You know, could you help us plan a conference? I'm like, our business is not conferences, right? We do this because it's a great way to convene all these amazing people. But it highlighted that I probably should explain a little bit more about what we do actually do. So why don't I share that? So look, Cambridge Capital is a private equity firm that invests in the supply chain world. And that gives us an early look at some amazing innovation that's happening in this ecosystem. BGSA is our investment bank that's been doing M&A for the last 25 years across all areas of supply chain. And that gives us an opportunity to be a force multiplier for a lot of the smart buyers and sellers that are here that are thinking about taking action. And then finally, 2026, this is a good time to be taking action. So let's talk a little bit about that. So on the Cambridge side, some of the themes that we are focused on that we're excited about. There's e-com fulfillment, growth in e-commerce, which creates all kinds of downstream supply chain opportunities, like the e-commerce enablement point that I shared on the M&A slide a couple minutes ago. Cross-border. So all this tariff noise and all these shifting trade winds mean that it's more important than ever to be able to solve cross-border needs. AI and predictive supply chain decisioning. And how do I use AI to be smarter and make better moves? Green screens was certainly a good example. Company using AI to do predictive pricing. Stat, which uses AI and other capabilities to be able to boost profitability for brands and recoveries from Walmart and Home Depot and Target and other retailers. AI and software-driven analytics of invoices and audit recovery and other ways to basically instantly boost bottom line. That's an area that you're going to see more of. Pure play software niche leaders. So like I'm focused on one thing, bring and last mile or reverse logics in returns. The U.S., Mexico, but really more broadly because it's more about Latin America as a whole and the growth opportunities in LATAM, and certainly lifted Colombia-based in tech-enabled last mile, great example. Niche 3PL and other specialist services, whether it's Everest and tech-enabled brokerage or Delivery Circle and tech-enabled last mile, these specialty areas. Supply chain resilience. This is, the category of dealing with risk, and given all the risks that we see in the world, and there's certainly an awful lot. All you got to do is read the newspaper and find something new and exciting to worry about. There's plenty of software opportunity to help companies mitigate that. And then, look, visibility, whether that's post-purchase, like Parcel Perform does with e-commerce, or whether that's for global shipments or otherwise. So these are some of the themes that we see that are driving innovation. And I'm sure there are others, and there are people in this room that are doing amazing things, not just in these, but plenty of other categories. One that I'm excited to share, and this is this was not public until right this second, is the latest investment that Cambridge made, which is a company called Moresby Group. And Moresby, which is here, Mitch and Hemi are here somewhere. Raise your hand. I can't see. There you are. There you go. Right. Sitting with the stat team. So fundamentally, what Moresby does incredibly well, using technology and negotiations, is help companies reduce long-tail procurement spend. So, if I took some item that maybe cost $1, but could I buy that for 90 cents, and does 10 cents matter that much? Not individually, but across a long list of long-tail items, those numbers add up. And if you're a US Foods or a FedEx or another Fortune 500 company that Moresby's worked with, and they've saved companies like those tens of millions of dollars, it's a big deal. And so fundamentally, that's about direct and indirect spend savings, which really in aggregate can be 5 to 8%. That's a big number. Without necessarily forcing a supplier change or any other process or internal friction. It's a fully outsourced turnkey solution, rapid path. I mean, you can get impact in weeks, and it's easy. And if you look at the major brands that they're working with and the massive impact, it's really quite exciting. So check them out. And it's a good illustration of many of the themes that we've just talked about. So on the BGSA side, we continue to be active in a broad range of M&A. The sale of Clarity, which was a carve-out of SML to Amegro, as a recent transaction, among many others, several that are pending. One that I was hoping we'd get to announce today, but I think it's going to take another 2 weeks. So lots of activity, and I think this is going to be a year of significant M&A activity just based on what we already see from the companies that we talk to. So certainly, if you're interested in ideas, by all means, please reach out. Finally, 2026. So this is a year of action. This is a year to make decisions. So where do I want to be on the board, and how do I want to ensure success? This is really, this is the time to do it. So I want to, at this point, just say that this is an exciting time for all of us here, and I hope it's an opportunity for everybody in this room to be able to take advantage of these themes to do something exciting. I also want to say it's a good time to be grateful, and I want to thank the many amazing companies that helped make this event successful and possible. I'm not going to read out all of the names because there are so many, but I encourage you to take a look. There's some wonderful companies and organizations that are here and that are a part of this. And by the way, while it's nice that we all chip in, and registration isn't cheap, and I know that, but the reality is the Breakers isn't cheap, and their Breaker staff here, they do an amazing job, but it costs a lot to make this event possible, and it's really thanks to the incredible sponsors here that can be the case. So I want to thank them, and I also want to thank the Cambridge and BGSA staff. And in particular, Jennifer Alfaro. Jennifer, where are you? Jennifer has been running this conference for 16 years. So, and those of you that are late with a survey or anything else, and Nick and Mike, I know all the harassment that you get from Jen, but it's all in good fun because she loves you. Jen is the one that makes all this happen, and so thanks to her, and BGSA and Cambridge staff that are there's Jen, and of course Jen. If Jen had a microphone right now, she'd be saying, "Don't forget the most important person who's standing next to her, and that's Elizabeth, my wife." 20 years ago, Elizabeth ran this conference and did everything, and was also 8.5 months pregnant with our son. And then 2 years later, she gave birth to our daughter, Mia. And then 2 years after that, Bob Bianco said, "How is this a conference if there's not another baby?" So, but we stopped it too. Elizabeth has been responsible for so much of this. Jennifer, again, incredible work. And then to the entire BGSA and Cambridge team, you guys, those of you that are here, stand up, please. You're standing back there already. Everybody puts a lot of time and an effort to make this work. So with that, I just want to conclude by saying we have an amazing day planned, and then another exciting day tomorrow. We're going to start with our first panel momentarily. I also just want to point out that in addition to everything that's on the program, there will be a surprise this afternoon, so you're going to want to be here for it. And but can't say anything else about it. So, but it'll be a full circle moment for a lot of people in this room. So with that, thank you. I'd like to invite our first panel to come up, and let's get going.